All right, so now that we have our high poly pass done on the character and the weapon, we need to go ahead and get these into a format where we can bake this detail and do our retopology. So the way we do that is we perform a reduction pass inside of ZBrush. Now, something to be aware of is the target you reduce to is going to be somewhat determined by the size of textures that you're going to end up using in your game. So what I usually aim for is around 500,000. That works fairly well inside of Maya and also can be carried over into something like Substance Painter. But it really also kind of depends on, the level of detail that you're going to need and whether or not your details are holding up at that resolution. Now, this is on a per object basis, meaning that the character is going to have that, the weapon's going to have that, so we can do this separately. And with a separated out object like this, if you wanted to, you could do it on a per object basis, but it's going to take a while to export. So let's go ahead and take a look at this process with the weapon here. The first thing I want to do is I essentially want to get rid of the additional layer information and the additional subdivision information on these and combine them down into singular meshes. Now, the reason I do that is it makes it a little bit easier for ZBrush to do the reduction. In theory, you can do the reduction with layers, you can do the reduction with subdivisions, but I find sometimes it causes ZBrush to crash. So what I like to do is just come through my assets here, come down to the layers, select this Bake All option. That's going to bake those down, and if I have any subdivisions, just delete those. I'll just repeat this process here for the staff. You'll see we have no subdivision. I'll come under the layers and just bake these, and then we'll finally do that for this little base. This one here has subdivisions, so I'll first bake the layers. So we'll bake those, and then come back to the geometry and delete lower. And what that will do is it will just bake this down into a solid object. We can then take these pieces and come down here to merge down. We can merge this into our axe haft and into our pommel here. So we have a singular piece, and we can see its current active amount is 7.8 million verts, which is very high. What we're going to do now is perform a decimation on it. So the process of doing that is coming up here to Z plugin, coming to the Decimation Master. I usually like to set the percent of decimation to around 34%. I find it works really well. You can adjust this. This is going to be what it reduces to. And we're going to do a two-step process where we're going to pre-process current and then decimate current. Now, I do want to show you there is a pre-process all and a decimate all. In my entire career, I have never had that work without crashing ZBrush. So what I do is I pre-process current, and what this is going to do is it's going to take a moment here to calculate it. It's going to calculate the service, figure out the topology, and find the best way to reduce this, and then we can decimate it after to reduce this down. Now, this does take a bit of time, and the more polygons your object has, the longer it's going to take. It's also a RAM-intensive process, so if you have other things open, it can cause it to crash or maybe even cancel out the process altogether. So I do have a video recording right now. I have a web browser pulled up. I have a couple chat things open for work stuff. So hopefully this won't have any errors, but I'm going to let this run, and we'll come back and we'll go ahead and see the end result so we can proceed with the decimation. But I'm not going to make you sit through this whole thing. Just know it takes a bit of time, and depending on the strength of your computer and the amount of verts your project has, it will take more or less time. So be patient. So that decimation pre-process finished. You can see nothing's happened here. So now we do the next step, which is coming in here after we've done our pre-process current and doing the decimate current. This will be a very similar process. You're going to notice in the top corner, it's going to be reading the mesh file. And what this is going to do is it's going to take that pre-process information and it's going to perform the reduction pass. And it's already finished, which is really nice. You can see this jump down to 2.6 mil, and you'll notice that nothing has changed visually, and that's exactly what we want. But if we turn on the wireframe, you'll see things have changed dramatically. And what's happened here is it's triangulated the surface. So essentially, it's reduced down this detail, but it's maintained the appearance. So reduction in terms of the amount of vertices being used, but preserving detail in terms of our end product. We want to redo this process until we get down to the targeted count. You might be thinking, could you just do this in one go? And the answer is yes, but it's a lot easier to maintain detail iteratively, meaning we tell the computer, analyze this and reduce, analyze this and reduce, analyze this and reduced, versus analyze all of this and reduce to this target. This generally gives better results doing it iteratively. So I'm going to repeat this process, going to Z plugin, pre-process current, processing, and then decimating. And as this clears out the higher poly data and it becomes more simplified, the pre-process is going to be faster and faster, and generally it goes quite smooth. And we can do this down to our target count. In this case, my target count's about 500,000. I could potentially have it be a little bit higher, even into the millions. Maya can handle that nowadays. And it really just depends on how strong the machine is you're on. So that's totally doable. The other thing to kind of talk about when it comes to game asset creation is, in some instances, if you have something that doesn't need to be deformed, this tool can be used exclusively to kind of get things down and then cleaned up later in Maya. It is something I have done professionally, and it can be very useful for complex things like skeletons, for example. I made a dinosaur skeleton once, and rather than manually retopologizing every bone, I actually used this for the finish pass. So every now and then, I will use this to create a game mesh. It does largely depend on the deadline and whether or not the topology matters. But for environment art in particular, this can be quite useful. I've used it a lot for things like rocks and stones as well, to get a nice look at a poly count that works for the game. When it comes to an asset like this for a character, though, we do really want to be able to deform it and adjust it in terms of rigging and all that other stuff. So we are going to perform a manual retopology. Our main goal with this is just to kind of capture the detail in a low enough polygon count that we can bring into Maya and we can bring into Substance Painter. With that said, you can generally go a bit higher in Substance Painter than Maya in terms of the projection, so we could have two separate ones. With video games generally having lower map sizes, I try and use the same one for retopology as I do for the projection inside of Substance. So I'm going to let this one finish, and then we'll see if it hit our target, and if not, we'll repeat the process. All right, so that one finished. We'll come in here and we'll just go ahead and go back to Z plugin. We'll decimate current on this. This should go pretty quick since the first one did. You'll see this is at 900. So this is pretty darn close to what we want. It's still holding up detail nicely, but we could still take it a little bit lower. At our 500 target, 50%, is going to be more than enough here. So 30 is probably a little bit too low if I want to maintain the 500. So we could kind of think about that. And the percent of decimation is kind of a target amount. You'll notice that 900 is lower than 50%, right? So we're percent decimating to this, meaning that this would take it even lower. I'll go ahead and just keep it at 34. And if it has any compromise on detail, we'll bump it up. But this should be good. And just remember, you can always undo. So I'm just pre-processing again and decimating again until I get, around 500K or under. And then we'll go ahead and move on to our character. But that's essentially going to be the process we're going to do. Rinse and repeat. And you can do this, across entire characters as well, which we'll see in a moment. I like to separate out by object. So if the axe is going to be one thing, then we're going to do that. If the character is going to be one thing, we're going to do that. All right, so our pre-process is done. Let's go ahead and decimate that. And hopefully this will give us our final results. The decimation's already done, and you'll see it's at 300K. Now, looking at it, I haven't seen any change from a distance. Up close, if we get in here, you'll see the polygons are going to be very triangulated. But I think this is going to work out very nicely for what we're going for and have no issues. So once you have something decimated and it's a part of the character, I do encourage you to come up here to export and export this out somewhere that's going to make sense. So what I usually like to do is put it into the source images here, or even into the assets or scenes. It just kind of depends on what we're going to ultimately use this as. In this case, I might consider putting it in scenes, just creating a new folder here. And we might even call this retopology if we want to. And inside this folder, I could just name this our axe decimated. And I usually like to put the count here, 300K. That way I know. Now, something I want to call out is we're not going to save this file. So we're not going to save it. The reason why is this is a destructive edit. I usually close this out and I don't come back to it. We can always repeat this process on the main file, right? It's not like we're doing a big edit here. Now, the one thing that is nice is the prep stuff, because there's a lot of it. So let's go ahead and turn off our axe group and start prepping the character here for decimation. Same sort of deal here. You know, I'm going to come in, I'm going to look at my layers. Looks like I don't have any. I'm going to delete subdivisions, and I'm just going to go down the stack here to edit each of these. So we'll just come to the horns. We're going to go to the layers, bake any of those layers, check the geometry, and there is none, so we're good. Or actually, there is. Delete. Then come to the next one here, the gloves. Same story. We're just going to come down here to layers, bake all, check if there's any subdivisions. Nope, we're good. And just repeat this process. So I'm going to go through this. I'll go ahead and speed this up in the video so you don't have to sit through me checking each of these. But make sure you go through each of them and just make sure that you have the layers baked and the subdivisions gone. And like I mentioned, the main purpose of this is to kind of help prevent errors in the decimation and prevent crashing. If you have something change colors to, there's a good chance it has poly paint turned on, and you can just go down to poly paint and toggle colorize to stop that from being a problem. All right, cool. So that gets all my layers cleaned up here. And this is going to be kind of the crazy part. We're going to merge these down. So I'm just going to go to merge down. We're going to hit always OK to skip this process. And we're going to go through and we're going to merge each of these. Now, something to be aware of is my character is very dense. This is a very high poly count. Because I kind of just went all willy-nilly on detail. This is going to be very intense for this to process, and my machine is capable of this. If you're on a lower-end machine, a lower-end laptop, and you've been sculpting like I have at these really high resolutions, you might want to decimate each of these individually first before you consider combining them, down to the point where the total adds up to less than 10 million, I would say. Mine's going to be around 30, 40 million here. Yeah, it looks like just short of 30 million. So this is going to be pretty intense to process. But I do like to process them all across the board, and this is to kind of ensure the detail is consistent. For a character of this density, we should still be able to bring it down to 500 because I don't have a whole lot of really fine detail. So let's start the process here. We'll just come up here. We'll go ahead and pre-process current here, and we'll let the process stack begin. So this may crash on me at some point. If it does, I'll kind of restart. But that's going to be the process of combining everything down. So I'm just going to click pre-process. I'm going to let this run, and very likely going to speed up the video file so you don't have to wait like I do. I'm anticipating this to take probably around 30 minutes. So just kind of be mindful of that. It can take a bit of time. Sometimes it surprises you and goes pretty quick. It's a very mysterious thing, but we'll let that run. And like I mentioned, this is still better than doing a pre-process all inside of a scene. Combining it into a singular mesh, it doesn't use up as much RAM. So usually this will give me a good result, but it is one of those things where, you know, plan your breaks around it, or other work that you have to do, because it is going to take a bit for this to bake down and become usable. All right, so this took quite a while to pre-process, and it just finished. So I do want to just kind of kick off the next part. After you pre-process your character, you know, come in here, run that decimation, and then just buckle up and wait it out. Just like we did with the axe, it'll be rinse and repeat until we have this low enough to actually use. So you can see the decimation finished here. Our first decimation took us from 27 down to 9. This is much more manageable. You'll see there's no real loss in detail. So we'll just proceed to continue with the process of pre-processing and then reducing down. Now, 9 million was about where our axe was sitting. So this should take about as long as the axe did, and it should be a lot more reasonable now. The main thing you want to be watching for as you do this reduction is you aren't losing any of the fine edges, you know, areas like the tips of the horn or corners of the helmet. Those are usually the places that are going to suffer the most, but with how we're doing this reduction, you know, we should be good. So we'll go ahead and let this reduce down to the next stage. All right, so our next one finished. We'll go ahead and decimate now, and we'll see where we get this to. We're at 9 million. This should drop it down probably to the 2-3 million marker, so we'll still have to do another pass. But once again, whenever you do this, just kind of keep a hawk eye on it. and just make sure, no huge change happens. So we're down to 3 million. If I take a look at this, it's still holding up close. You can see how much decimation we have. That's pretty substantial. So yeah, let's go ahead and repeat the process again here. And hopefully in 2 or so more of these, we'll have a finished mesh. All right, so we're done processing our 3 million here. Let's go ahead and decimate this and see the end result. This is where we get into a gray area. This isn't going to put us around 500. It's going to put us around 1 million. And we do have to decide, if this is good enough, if we'd want to go lower. And I think at 1 million, this is doable. I don't necessarily want to go lower if possible. And the thing is, if we can bring this into Maya, what we can do is we can go ahead and split it into parts. And then all of a sudden, Maya is going to have an easier time processing this, which is kind of ironic. And when we export this out, we're going to have better quality overall once we go to our other file. So let's go ahead and export this guy out at 1 million here. I'm just going to go to export. We're going to save this into our same location as we saved our axe. So let me come in here to our assets, get into our source images here, get into our scenes, go into that retopology folder, and we'll just go ahead and switch this to hero decimated. And I'll go ahead and put this at 1M for 1 million and just hit save. And now that we have this decimated, we're ready to move over into Maya again and get this set up to start our retopology process. So let's take a look at getting this set up in Maya real quick here, and then we'll explore the retopology process next. So at this point, heading back into Maya, I don't want to close out my decimation document yet, but I don't necessarily want to save it. I'm going to keep this open. We need to decide where we want to bring this into. So we did have our block out here. We finished here, I think, with 04 here. And let me just make sure this one is nice and cleaned up. If you have stuff from this high poly pass that you feel you can use for the retopology purpose, by all means, keep this and use it as a start point. I don't really, because I decided to smooth this all down. So an earlier iteration might be better, and we can look into that. Likewise with the axe, I don't need to have the high poly, but our low poly axe here was pretty good, so I'm going to keep that. I don't need this volume cube. I can get rid of that. And as a matter of fact, I don't even necessarily need these image planes anymore. So I can strip down the scene, and I can go ahead and optimize it here. Just to kind of clear out the junk data. Under the axe here, I'll just make this low for our low poly, and we can go ahead and import our files now. So I'm going to kick things off by going to File and importing our axe to begin with. I'll navigate over to our retopology and just import the axe here. This way I have access to it, and we can see the axe. So it came in here, no problem. Looks great. Looks like our high poly one out of ZBrush did. That's our goal. I'm going to come up here to make it easier to retopologize and do a mesh separate on it. It'll be a lot easier to retopologize separate pieces initially, or combine them together in a way that will make them easier to work with. So I'm going to Shift P on this, just delete their history to kind of clear this out. And you can name these if you want, but because we might be doing some work across them, I'm just going to hit Control G and just go ahead and name this our axe decimated. And then we're going to put this on a layer. I'll make this my axe high and save. And then we'll go ahead and proceed to bring in the character the same way. We'll go ahead and import our character here in terms of the hero decimated. This might take a moment because 1 million polygons is a lot. So just got to be mindful of that. And once again, if you're on a lower end computer like a laptop, you may have to go lower in decimation. Now, this is the reason I didn't close out my decimation file, though, is just in case we have any issues here. It looks like it came in no problem, and we're just going to repeat the same process here, selecting this and doing a mesh separate. Now, once we separate this, it's not going to be recognized as a single 1 million polygon object. It's going to be recognized as individual polygon objects that are less than 1 million. So this is going to make it a little bit easier to work with. With that said, we do want to come in and combine the mirrored elements. So I'm going to do a mesh combine here on the gloves. I'll repeat the process on the shoulders, repeat the process on the horns, knees, and boots. And anything we want to keep separate, we'll keep separate. There are some things I'll probably really retopologize together, like the torso and the belt here. Really depends on the style we're going for, but we'll address those as we go. Another area I might combine is actually the head and neck, but we actually combined that already, so we're good. All right. So once again, you can just Shift P to remove all of these from groups here. Delete their history to clear out any groups that we have. Group them again here, and we can just make this our hero decimated. Throw this on a layer over here as our hero high. And then we have a scene we can work in. So we have our axe high, we have our axe low. We're pretty much good to go. In terms of this too, looking at the axe low here compared to the axe high, I don't think we need to make any changes. We stayed pretty darn close to the geometry. So I think, honestly, any changes we make, we can decide later. But the shape didn't change enough to warrant us needing to actually do any stuff on the axe. So our retopology process is going to focus on the character, and that's the advantage of low to high, is if your low poly looks good, you're ready to go into texturing. The downside of high to low is now we actually have to rebuild this thing in a way that's going to work for games. So just got to be mindful of that. Shouldn't be too bad, but we'll get into that next, looking at the retopology. But this is going to be the process of going from ZBrush back into Maya. Let's go ahead and save the scene now that we have it set up. I'm going to put it into my retopology folder here, and I'll just name this hero retopology 01. Save, and then we can start building out that game mesh. And just a heads up at this point, we have everything set up. It all worked out well. This file we had in ZBrush for decimation, just go ahead and hit the exit button there. You don't need to save it. If we need to come back and do more decimation, we can start with our decimated mesh as a base to save time. But really, we're good. We're done there. We can move on, and we can start the retopology process now in Maya. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.